Welcome to the Health and Wealth Podcast. This is a show dedicated to the pursuit of health and wealth without losing your health to attain that wealth. With this podcast, we're going to share stories and best practices of successful business owners who either sell health or have health as part of their business plan. You're going to get great marketing and strategic advice from proven, successful experts. We will also be sharing stories from successful entrepreneurs who lost their health on the road to wealth, what they learned, and how they do things differently now, both in business and in life. Let's welcome your host, businesswoman, personal trainer, and podcast queen, JJ Flazanes.
Welcome to the show, everyone. I'm JJ Flazanes, your host and producer. Thank you for downloading today's episode. Today, we're going to talk about channeling, healing, and manifestation. I'm very excited about today's show, and I want to invite you to a live show that we're going to do, or a live conversation we're going to have about today's content with my guest, Eesha Patel, on Clubhouse. So for any of you that have a Apple product like an iPad or an iPhone, you are currently open and welcome to join or to apply to be let into Clubhouse, which is a new social media platform. And on Wednesday, January 13th at 4 p.m. Pacific time, 7 p.m. Eastern time, we are doing a live conversation. So if you want to come and talk to Eesha, I'm also having on Melanie Benson and Allison Melody and Adam Shibley. So again, we're going to be talking about abundance and manifestation and how to, if you had nothing in your bank account right now, if you were completely in the nothing state, what would you do about it? And we have some really cool gifts on today's episode once you get towards the end that Eesha has for you that she just created. But it really got me excited about bringing together this collective of people to do a live show, if you will, on Clubhouse. Now, if you're not on Clubhouse, that's okay. And no, it won't be recorded and I can't share it anywhere else. Clubhouse is it's an app that you talk with people live, and people schedule events and you can come to them, or some people just jump on calls. There's always different kinds of information. So again, if you're already on Clubhouse, come over and follow me, JJ Flazanes, and then come to our call on Wednesday. It'll be really exciting. So today's guest is Eesha Patel. She is an international channeler, speaker, author, and healer. She is a spiritual mentor to world-class coaches, speakers, and entrepreneurs who are here to serve humanity. Over the last 5 years, she has helped over 10,000 people and is the founder of Origin Activation, a powerful, multidimensional, and energetic healing modality. Welcome to the show, Eesha.
Thank you.
So I don't even know where to start this conversation. I'll be honest with all of you guys. We've been chatting about the direction to take, and there's so much good stuff here, from the solstice to taking charge of your health, from activation, origin activation, which is something specific that Eesha does. And I wanted to sort of combine it all. So I think how we're going to start, Eesha, is just to start talking about your story, because the things that you've created, the things that you're attracted to, the things that you emanate out in the world, and your position, if you will, in terms of your soul's purpose right now in this time and space, had to start somewhere. And most of us don't wake up at 5 years old knowing what that is. And even if we do, somehow it usually gets crushed sometime in our childhood by parents who are afraid of our gifts. And then later in life, we kind of reemerge as what we're here to do. And so why don't we start with a little bit of your backstory as to your journey to today and doing what you're doing?
Right. So, I guess I did grow up with spirituality from a young age because, so my mum is Hindu and my dad is Muslim. So I grew up going to the temples, and I grew up also in a very, diverse environment when it comes to spirituality and also religion. As a child, my parents put me into Catholic education. So I also grew up with stories of the Bible. And then at the age of 19, I guess I wanted to explore that even further. And so I started exploring the Baha'i faith, and I ended up going on a spiritual pilgrimage. But I guess the key turning point for me was actually about 5.5 years ago. So we're talking mid 2015. And the catalyst for that awakening was coming out of a long-term relationship. So as soon as I exited that relationship, I literally felt my energy expand like there was no tomorrow. And essentially, I started channeling overnight. So for me, the awakening in many ways, while there was quite a big lead up and years of meditation practice prior to this, it really did have one of those overnight awakening kind of scenarios where one day I was normal and the next day I wasn't.
And so how did that manifest in terms of channeling? How did you get images, or did you get images, or were they words, or sounds, or pictures?
Right. So the first thing that happened to me was late one night. It must have been 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, and it was through words. So out from my mouth, all these words just started coming through, and they said, "We are the Mayan elders," and I'd never even heard of that before. And I remember speaking so fast that I couldn't even comprehend what I was saying. So I got my phone out and I actually recorded this conversation, and then I listened back to it so that I could make sense of it. But it was really not long after that I did start getting images as well. And it was actually the images that I received that became the catalyst for the next phase of the journey. So a few days after I had that first channeling trance experience, I was just in a meditation group with a friend of mine, and I received this symbol, and it was a triangle, had a circle in the middle, had all these little circles around it, and I essentially heard this voice that told me exactly that I had to make this symbol on a piece of like artwork or something, like actually draw it up, and they gave me the exact dimensions and the way it should look and the colors and all of that. And they told me it was a sacred geometry DNA activation, which back then I really had no idea what that even was. But I listened to the guidance, and over the coming days, I received a series of 10 different images, which I still have. I still have little doodles in my notebook from years ago of what these images are. And I ended up taking the first four of those images because that's what I was guided to do at the time. And I made them up on Microsoft Word, just really basically. And I invited some friends to meditate with me on those symbols. So my very first event that I held was just a matter of weeks after I had this awakening, and I had zero experience in hosting meditation. I had zero experience in energy healing. I had zero experience in facilitating anything. But I put up an event on Facebook, and I just invited some people to come and join me. And I said, "Look, I've got these codes. It's a DNA activation. Do you want to come do it with me?" And I had 7 people say yes. They paid me $15 and they came to my studio and we meditated. And that was the game changer, because 3 people in that room actually connected with the galactic energy and Arcturian starship that actually was present in the space. And I saw that it was there, but when the other 3 people in the room also saw that it was there, I was like, holy moly, I think these codes actually work.
Wow. Okay. So we are all connected now. And prior to this, had you been around anyone who had channeled before? I mean, was it something that just sort of you eased into? Was it uncomfortable in any way? Did you feel any kind of physical sensation or negative emotion either before, during, or after it?
Right. So I think at that point I had heard of one channeler. I think I'd listened to like one recording or something that my friend had passed on to me. And I remember listening to it and going, oh, I could probably do that. And yeah, so it was a little bit funny when I did wake up and suddenly this started happening to me. But in saying that as well, because I hadn't really spent a lot of time on YouTube listening to other channelers, or so I didn't really know kind of what it was. Like I'd heard of the concept of it, and I'd heard of that it was possible. But yeah, I'd never really met anyone in person, or really followed anyone like that. So look, yeah, it was a little bit daunting at first. And I remember the first time I had this experience, I remember my energy field felt so expanded. It was like my body was there, but my energy was like kilometers upon kilometers around me. So it was like I entered this complete trance meditative state where like I was in my body, but I was also not in my body.
I understand. I haven't channeled per se, and if I have, I wasn't in the same way. I don't think there was like a separate entity that necessarily came in, but I've had the experience of expanding my energy so much. I did an event in 2018, my very first live event, where I had asked people who listen to the podcast to come together in order to do some of the deeper healing work and to do some of the things that we needed to do physically in person to have some more cellular changes and rerouting our brain patterns. And when the weekend was over, and I remember walking upstairs to my room to either unpack, to get my stuff, or to start packing up to go, it was the first time that I'd ever experienced like a letting down of a shield or an aura, or like holding an energetic space. Like I felt like if I was to draw a picture, it's almost like I was holding a bubble in the entire weekend. And then when I got upstairs, because it was over and it could release, like I felt it fall. I felt it shake on either side of my body and fall down. Like, okay, you're done now. You don't have to hold this space any longer. And it was one of those really cool experiences that it really changed the idea of vibration. I mean, I understood vibration, I understood frequency and energy and emotion and all of that to a certain degree. And this, like when I actually had a physical experience, sort of shifted that for me. So I know that there are a lot of people, or maybe not a lot of people, but I know lots of people that channel. Some people change their voice. Some people allow entities to come through them and take over their body. Some people don't have that, give up that kind of control, and they get just the pictures and they get the words, but they keep their control over their body. So what is your experience, or what was your experience when this was happening to you?
Look, back then, I think I wasn't even aware enough really to notice those layers of subtlety. And now, now I understand what you say about the bubble of energy. I've experienced that in some of my group events. In fact, every time I set up a group event, there is a type of energy field set, as you would know. But the other thing I will speak to as well is that the way that I work now is very different to how I first started. And one of the biggest things I actually learned along the way was actually how careful you have to be when you're in a trance channeling state. Because what I was doing back then was actually trance channeling, in the sense that my consciousness was stepping out of the way and another energy was entering my body. And while that was the way that I originally learned how to do it, I learned later on down the track that it's actually very unadvisable to do that. And this is where I think we can get into a little bit of this sense of sovereignty and who we are as human beings, because whether we are, in the 3D and allowing people on Earth to overstep energetic boundaries, or allowing other dimensional entities to enter our energetic boundaries, you still have to be so mindful of holding your center in that space and being really, acknowledging and aware of your connection to source. And I guess one of the big things that happened for me a couple of years down the track from that point was realizing that all beings that are actually vibrating at the highest frequency of love would never enter your energetic space in that way to begin with. So that really rattled me when I discovered that.
That's great. And that actually explains why I've seen a few people channel and give over their energy. And there's something that doesn't resonate with me. There's something, my body doesn't respond well. My intuition says this isn't a good thing. This is a little scary. Not that I'm afraid of it from a psychological standpoint, but there's something, I think what you're talking about, that sovereignty of giving over that space, and also identifying with possibly that you've now taken a possible very high frequency and it's now come down. We've now come into a space where there's a little less light, a little less love, a little less freedom, a little less ownership of that through line, that groundedness, that centeredness, that alignment that the person has to have initially, even to allow those messages to come in the first place. So I that kind of explains why I've had sort of a negative reaction recently to watching a few people who have literally given over their bodies to channel, and I get judgy about it, or I get like protective about it. And I'm like, no, that there's something wrong here. I don't know what it is. I don't know how to explain it, but I think you just explained it. So now with these gifts and with this practice that you've been doing, so now it's been about 5 years that you've been doing this consistency. I know you've created a few things or you've been channeling things that now you've brought into form, such as the origin activation. Can we talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Origin activation is Yeah, I mean, it's been my line of work for the last few years quite solidly in that I guess when I first started, delivering these activations and running these meditation groups, I did eventually in my first year of all of this go and get a qualification. So I became a Reiki master and I started studying, all these different things. But what my guides kept saying to me was that there's a different way, and that a lot of these tools and techniques that already exist in the world, many of them are from, hundreds, maybe even thousands of years ago. And the energy on the planet when those things came through was different to what the energy on the planet is now. And so they kept telling me that there's a new way and that you have to tap into the current energy of this earth, which is ascending, right? We're going into a higher frequency. So it makes sense that the tools and methods that people were using 200 years ago aren't actually the most efficient. So in 2016, I actually started running an energy healing circle. And the intention behind it was that we would just get a bunch of Reiki practitioners and other energetic healing facilitators, put them all in a room together, and we'd have the opportunity to exchange the variety of modalities between us. What ended up happening was in those sessions, I did end up channeling essentially an entire new philosophy and modality. So over 6 months in these groups that I was running, I just kept receiving more and more information about how we needed to start seeing people as whole, and how we needed to stop putting people into this paradigm of one person is the healer and the other person's being healed, and how we can actually invite people to step into a space of empowerment with their own healing, and realizing that even as healers and facilitators, all we really do is light the pathway for someone else to find their own wholeness.
I agree with that 100%. I am an empowerment strategist. I have my own empowerment strategist sort of method that I want to teach others, but ultimately it's about the work. It's never about the person facilitating the work, right? Because as you said, everyone has to be enlightened to their own path, and you give them the tools. No healer can do the tools for you or can do the work for you. You may be able to clear things, you may be able to stimulate things, you may be able to awaken things, but what that person does after that is on them, not on you. And I think that there's been a misunderstanding about the power or the lack of power that we all individually have of healing ourselves and delegating some of that to somebody else, because ultimately our paths are all set. I agree about ascension. I did a show with Dr. Christian Northrup earlier this year called The Great Awakening, and what's going on in the world right now. And of course, the highest version of that is this great awakening that we're going through. But it doesn't mean that everyone's going to be awake, and it doesn't mean that it isn't going to be hard or painful or uncomfortable for a lot of people, and that it's all going to be, roses and hearts and stars. It's going to be the caterpillar becoming the butterfly. There's the struggle, there's the growth, there's the breakdown to the breakthrough, and it's not going to look the same for everybody. It's going to be a different path. So when you were doing these energy healing circles and you were coming up with this new paradigm and you were going back into that empowerment place, is that what the origin activation is? Or can you explain that a little bit more?
Right. So, yeah, one of the key principles is that you are already healed and you're already whole, right? I think that really, is the crux of everything that is the origin activation. But in saying that as well, I guess one of the, what the guide said to me was that we need to stop thinking that the power to heal is actually outside of ourselves. But even beyond that, I guess one of the key things that I teach in origin activation is that everything is already source. So if you believe this idea that, we are spiritual beings having a human experience, then at the end of the day, everything is part of this creation that we call source or universe or God or whatever it is that you want to name it. And when you understand that every cell within the body, at some point in some time, space, dimensional reality, that cell is actually light. And if that cell right now is experiencing, say, some form of pain or discomfort or dis-ease, as people say, then that's just temporary, right? That's just something that is existing in this moment. And it could have been created based on karma, belief systems, your diet, who knows what the cause of that is. But the point is that if you trace that energy back to its original form, you can essentially use this idea that where attention goes, energy flows. And if you see that cell in its absolute wholeness and in its absolute divinity, then in that moment, that actually becomes true. So for me, when I have somebody that comes to me, and I've seen this so many times, people walk into my room and I don't see them in their pain. I don't see them in their stories. I don't see them in their beliefs or their dramas. When someone walks into my space, I literally just see their divinity. And the people that are ready to step into that and actually embrace that for themselves, they do receive spontaneous healings. So I have seen on many occasions, I don't even know what is supposedly wrong with the person. All I know is they step into my room and it doesn't exist anymore.
Well, that's very cool. And so are these origin activations something that someone has to be present to do in a room with you?
No, it works remotely as well. I do work with people all over the world. It can be done in a group setting. It can be done one-on-one. Some people receive spontaneous healings just by listening to my meditation. They just go download it off the website, and that in itself heals them. Because energy is energy, right? And so everything that I guess, emit out to the world has that frequency. And I know that while everybody is perfectly capable of doing this themselves, a big, I guess, barrier for people is that belief. And so when my belief of them is stronger than the belief in themselves, essentially one of the key principles is that everything aligns to the highest vibration. So when I hold that as the highest frequency in the room, it becomes true. So even if the person doesn't believe that they are healed, when they are in the presence, whether it's physical presence, energetic presence through just listening to one of my meditations, there is this sense of I guess the highest frequency in the room being the belief that you are divinity. And when that becomes the primary frequency, everything does align to that. So in that moment, it can definitely become true for the person that is interacting with either myself or my resources in any way.
I have also, when I look at people, and maybe it's the difference of, again, the tools that we're using, or that you're holding a space higher than possibly I am. I do normally look at people in their, I'm not going to say divinity, but in their highest potential. I guess divinity could be the next level up for me, but I look at the highest potential. And sometimes what I've learned over the years for me, in good and bad, people are usually attracted to me because they feel possibility and they feel
Yeah.
belief of that possibility. The sticky point becomes for all people when, like you said, if they don't believe it, I can't make it happen for them. I can help to elevate that frequency, but once they leave, if they can't sustain anything close to that and fall back into a disbelief, right, then that the momentum kind of stops. And I do believe that your coaches, your healers, the people that you work with, your trainers, everyone who you want to work with should see you in a higher light, should see your possibilities, should see. I was just working with someone, not in a personal development way, but someone who is helping me to get something. And I said to them, maybe where this is not a fit, because I need a person of possibility. I need someone who can see beyond what is in front of you, who can see possibility amongst things telling you the opposite. And because that's who I am, and that's what I need help with in this area of getting this thing that I want. So on top of this origin activation, so then you started to do this work, and it was group at first, and then it was individual, or then how did it sort of morph into talking about money and doing things around the solstice and all the things that you're doing, again, with money and with leaders and with coaches that you're doing now?
Right. So while my career did start off with the healing, it mostly did begin with one-on-one sessions because, to be honest, when I first started, all of this was so experimental. My guides were like, "Hey, you can do this thing and people can heal instantly." And I was like, "Yeah, cool. I believe it when I see it." So there's definitely me testing my own boundaries of what I was capable of doing. But it really wasn't long before I started to see the results. And I guess I guess my 4-minute mile, if you want to put it like that, was a moment in 2017 when I had the concept of origin activation, which back then was under a different name, but I had the idea that it was possible. I just didn't see it until someone came to one of my small group events. And we had in that one 4 people in a room. We're meditating together. And this lady was due to go in for a surgery. And I didn't even know any of this about her. She actually told me all of this later. But she came, she did the meditation, and then she sent sent me a message saying that she could feel in that meditation that these, this energy was being shifted in her sacral chakra. And she was due to go in for a checkup, a pre-surgery checkup. When she went to the pre-surgery checkup, the surgeon or the person checking her essentially said the issue is completely resolved, and they couldn't believe it. Like, they couldn't understand, because she was supposed to go into surgeries 3 days later and she didn't end up having the surgery. So she obviously messaged me and was like, oh my God, like I could feel that this was shifting in the meditation and I think it's actually been healed. And I was like, wow. So that was the moment where I actually believed that my own theories actually made sense, because I was able to see the proof in that. And from there, it just snowballed. Because once you see something, the possibility of it happening once, you go, cool, if it's happened once, it can happen again. Right. And it did keep happening again. And so then I had people that were coming to me for one-to-one sessions, and they'd come in with all variety of aches and pains. And I would just look at them and I'd be like, it's just not there. And I would just shift the energy in that space, and they would walk out with absolutely no pain. In saying that, though, what I also learned, and this has been a huge part of my journey, and you touched upon it earlier, what people do after the session is on them. And so what was happening was I was doing these incredibly powerful sessions for people, but then people were not able to sustain or maintain the higher frequency for themselves. So that's when I shifted from doing healing sessions to actually having mentoring programs, because while I can definitely do a one-off healing session, it would definitely help someone. I've realized that there's not much point in just, having people coming in and me just shifting the energy when 3 months down the track, they haven't changed any of their lifestyle. They haven't changed their beliefs. They haven't changed anything about, how they created that illness in the first place. To the point where it actually sustains in the long term. And because I do believe in this, this sovereignty and this empowerment, I'm not going to be that person that just saves people and fixes it for them forever. I actually want to teach people how to raise their frequency themselves. And so that's when Origin Activation became more of a mentoring type of program, rather than people coming in just for one-off sessions. Now, the evolvement of that was me quickly realizing that if I was going to spend, 12 months or so mentoring someone, that's really slow. And so I thought, well, there's 7.8 billion people in the world. There's no way I can do them all one by one. And so Origin Activation very quickly became a practitioner training program.
And when you're looking for who to train, is it anyone who wants to do the work, or are there pre-qualifications for the right kind of people?
Well, at the moment, I'm only working with entrepreneurs. So a lot of my existing client base are already in the coaching and healing sort of field. And I find that that's been necessary because Origin Activation, look, it really is quite an advanced modality. And while I can teach people who are starting at ground zero, and I have done that, I've taught people who know nothing about anything and I've taken them all the way through the process in 12 months. There's actually so much behind the scenes of it that at the moment, my vision for reaching and impacting as many people as possible is actually more easily fulfilled when the people that come to me already have done the groundwork. So if somebody already has an existing full-time coaching or healing or leadership type of business, and they're already doing NLP, they're already doing Reiki, they're already doing some of the foundational stuff, then Origin Activation comes in and actually brings that to a whole new multidimensional level. So at the moment, the majority of people that I'm training as facilitators are very much already in that field and already have the business side of it down pat. So that I don't have to teach them how to then go out and get clients and all of that side of it, which ultimately means that the modality gets out faster.
Gotcha. So this is just on the application of Origin Activation. This is not on actually how to have a business or to get clients, like you said, or to market or anything like that, correct?
I have done that in the past. Actually, I've still got some of my current clients that are in that, because when I first started teaching it, the people that were coming to me were people that were transitioning from a 9-to-5 job into wanting to be a healer full time. And so I was teaching the business side of it as well. And this is why I can help people with the money side of things, right? So I learned how to, apply Origin Activation to things like abundance and clearing money blocks. And people had incredible results. I mean, I've had people that have come to me I had one guy a few months ago who wanted to drop out of Origin Activation because he couldn't make the next monthly installment. And I said, no, let's have a session. And so I pulled his session forward by a couple of weeks, and we did the session. And within 2 weeks, he'd made $10,000 in trading and had made the rest of the money. And I believe the rumor is he's now building $1 million house 6 months down the track. So, I've definitely seen a lot of miracles happen, and the money side of it is definitely huge. But yeah, I mean, I guess it just depends on where people are meeting me in that journey. And at the moment, the majority of people that I'm working with already have high 6 to 7 figure dollar businesses. And so I just help them get the energetic transformational part of it and take that to the next level.
Well, we have a special gift to give all of you, but we're not going to tell you about it till the end of the show because I don't want to get sidetracked because I have another question. And just so that you know, you will have access to this free gift. It's called the Abundance Kickstarter. So get excited, but hold on, we're not done yet. So we're taking this Origin Activation, we're teaching it to other people who have businesses or want to have businesses. And then from there, where does that put you? I know that you did a video during the solstice, and I know it caused a lot of grief and some waves for you. Can we talk about how that work is sort of connected and the messages coming through right now and the focal point right now and what you want people to know, regardless if they ever do anything moving forward or not?
Yeah, to be honest, the earthwork that I do really is my number one mission. I mean, I've been guided to do planetary work for years and years, and I've gone to all variety of sacred sites around the world to essentially work with the grid lines that help with the awakening of humanity. And the planetary grids are such a vital and important part of the collective mass awakening, because as humans, each human is doing their inner work. There is also very much a collective element in that. And that, I guess, is in some ways it's my give back, but it's also my primary mission, because the rest of what I do in my business actually just facilitates the earthwork. I mean, you don't get paid to travel the world and do the earthwork without having the business. And so the business essentially funds me being able to travel the world and work with the grid lines, which I do very much behind the scenes. And I really, up until this year, hadn't really talked about it much. But recently I went to Uluru for the solstice, and I did post some videos about it, and it got extremely controversial. So I guess that was my coming out to the world of this other thing that, for the most part, I've been doing quietly in the background while I've had my business at the forefront.
Okay, questions. We need to talk about where the grid lines are. What is the earthwork that you're doing? Is it like a meditation, like a pulling up of the vibrational and frequency around these grid lines, and how you're doing that? And then, of course, why did you being there? Where are you based normally?
That's a great question. Today, I'm in Perth, and I am from Perth, but I have been on the road for at least 6 months now. I actually left Perth 6 months ago when all this coronavirus stuff happened, and I wasn't able to come back until quite recently because of all the border closures that we've had in Australia. So I've just been traveling around the different states, managed to avoid quarantine so far, which is always good. But yeah, so at the moment, I don't actually have like one permanent base. I've mostly been on the road, and it is largely because of what's been happening with the borders, that I've just had to unplug myself from anchoring anywhere and just be where it is that I need to be. So it's been very much on the move at the moment.
All right, let's go back to the earthwork and what that looks like, and the grid lines.
Right. So I am quite intuitive and connected to the energy flows of the planet. So basically, she just tells me where to go. And when I say she, I mean like Mother Earth, Gaia, whatever you call it. I just have a lot of love for her. And when I get guided to go to a place, it's just this feeling that I need to be in a specific place at a specific time. And every time it always works out so beautifully. And every time I'm always so supported in the journey. Whenever I'm doing missions, I just find myself in this beautiful flow of synchronicity. Now, there's a lot of, I guess, different schools of thought around like what these ley lines are and the chakra points and that sort of thing. And I guess for me, to be honest, I haven't really looked too much into what other people are saying about it, because it's a very intuitive knowing. So I just get told, like for example, I'll go back to the 7-7 gateway that I did in Sedona a few years ago. That was in July 2017. I just got told, Eesha, you have to be here at this date, this time. and you'll find out what to do when you get there. So I don't even get told the whole mission until I arrive. I have to be in this massive trust and massive flow. I essentially just have to show up, and then the rest of it all just kind of falls into place. So when I got to Sedona, I remember driving into the town, and there was a crystal shop just on the way in. And I remember pulling into there, and again, I'm just following the guidance. And I went to her and said, I've got this like vision. It's a picture of a place, and it looks like this, and it's got these bushes, and it's got this rock in front of it. And I just described to her this one singular image that I'd received. And then she points to a photograph on the wall, and she's like, "Is that it?" And I was like, yes, what is that? And she's like, that's the Bell Rock Vortex. And again, I went in with no research, would you believe? I probably could have looked all this stuff online, but I tend to just go with my inner guidance. So I didn't know anything about the vortexes. I didn't know anything about what was actually in that area that I was being drawn to. And so I get to this place and I see this photograph. And I'm like, yes, how do I get there? And so she tells me it's a Bell Rock Vortex. And I just happened to, without even knowing, have on that morning booked accommodation at the Bell Rock motel or hotel or whatever it was. And so I happened to be staying at the place that was essentially in direct view of where it is that I had to do my mission. So of course, nothing happens by chance. I go plonk my things down in this hotel, and I can see this Bell Rock in front of me. And so as I'm tuning into the energy lines, I can literally see, in my inner vision, I could see the vortex was not stable. And I could see that it was essentially like a spinning top that was wobbling, if you can get that visual in your mind. And so I looked at it and I was like, okay, cool. I can see the vortex. I can see its instability. And this was actually a moment where, I said to my guides, I was like, guys, why have you sent me all the way from Australia to here? Isn't Sedona one of the most spiritual places on town? Like, surely someone else here can do this work. And my guides were like, no one knows how to do this. You're the person that needs to do this. This is why you've come all the way here. So I was like, okay, cool. Tell me what to do. And so they guided me, they showed me where to go. And I remember on the morning of the 7-7 gateway, I was guided to go into a little spot in the bush just outside the rock. And I made a medicine wheel. And this was all, again, very just spontaneous in the flow. I'd never made a medicine wheel before. I hardly knew what it was, but I got a bunch of rocks from the area and I just made this circle, and then it was done. And then they said to me, just come back at 7 p.m. tonight and finish it off. So I was like, okay, cool. I, sat in my hotel room. It was ridiculously hot that day, so you don't want to be walking around anytime after 10 a.m. So I just chilled out for the day, and then it got to about 6:30 and I felt, okay, it's time to go back out and finish what I started. So I went back out there, and the funniest part was, like, the energy felt so different at that second part of the day. Now, when I went out again, I went to go find the spot where I placed the medicine wheel, and I walked around for ages and I just couldn't find it. And I thought, forget it, don't worry about it. I found a rock to sit on, and they told me just to meditate with some specific lights and some specific frequencies and geometries. And they usually guide me quite clearly on that. So I did what it is that I needed to do. And then I heard this voice in my head that said, you're done and you need to go now. I was like, oh, wow, like that was really abrupt. So I finished my meditation. I quickly grabbed all my things and I got up and left. And I could see in the 20 minutes that I've been sitting down meditating, this vortex had just been created above me. And just all these clouds had appeared out of nowhere, and you could literally see these clouds in a vortex above the rock where I'd been meditating. And by the time I walked from the Bell Rock back to my hotel, which was just a few minutes, it started bucketing down with rain, and there was a massive thunderstorm that came in out of nowhere. And then I just heard, it's done.
Cool. So cool. This is just the epitome of trust and alignment, of allowing the messages to come through and following the impulse. I mean, it's just, there couldn't be anything more clear than being completely guided. And like you said, having the deepest amount of trust in those messages, not questioning them. So it leads me to want to know, Eesha, what your astrology is. Do you know your sun and moon sign?
So I'm a Virgo. Somebody was telling me this quite recently, actually. But I always forget. To be honest, I don't put a lot of energy into astrology, because sometimes I find that if I get too in my head about it, then it actually prevents me from just being in the moment with the guidance. So while I have been told many, many times, I think I have a what was my rising? No, it's not even on the tip of my tongue. Someone told me this literally less than a week ago, and I can't remember.
All right. So we know you're a Virgo, but we have no idea what your moon or your ascendant is. Yeah.
No, I should know. I literally
No,
was
no.
having this in-depth conversation like just days ago.
Well, but it just like you said, it's not something that it doesn't change anything about what you do. It doesn't
No.
give you any information. It doesn't create a structure. It doesn't answer questions. So it's unnecessary. I'm always curious because again, all the elements, I'm always curious to see how the elements work together in different people and what the different, I just like to study patterns basically, and the patterns of possibility. And I often see sometimes some people like talking about like frequency, vibration, and being able to trust. And trust is the intuition is a physical trust and an emotion, and a lot of people, and it also can have a lot of air in it too. So they're just structures, and again, I just, it's one of those things that I geek out on. So I thought I'd ask. It's not a problem that you don't know. I don't even need to do your chart. I just wanted to ask the question. So now we're traveling around, and you are helping by doing earthwork and on the grid lines, and just, I love the trust. It's a breath of fresh air to hear the amount and level of trust that you have. Like, you're so clear, you're so guided, and you're so in that space, and the vortex of receiving and that you've created for yourself is obviously amazing and excellent. So it really speaks to, I'm sure, what you can do to help others. And I know that through doing the work in helping people with their businesses, and one of the things that I know we want to share is something that you've just created called the Abundance Kickstarter. Why don't we talk about that?
Right, the Abundance Kickstarter. Yeah, this is my freshest, latest creation that is actually still in pre-launch. But yeah, basically it just got born a few days ago because I normally in January, it's a really good time to lay the foundations for abundance and finances. And I did a promo on one of my other products, which is the 5-day money challenge. And that one always has incredible results for a lot of people. But yeah, I mean, I guess at the moment, people are, I guess, struggling financially. And even with the promotion that I did, a lot of people said they couldn't afford that. And so I thought to myself, geez, Eesha, what would I do if I had $0 in the bank account, couldn't afford to pay, for anything to help me in that? How would I create abundance today? And so the Abundance Kickstarter is essentially how I would bring abundance into my life from absolute ground zero, $0 in the bank account. And so this free training, we are about to run soon. Like I said, it hasn't actually been launched yet, but as soon as we have the links, we'll definitely be sending them out. And yeah, I guess really inviting people to believe in the possibility that you can create something from nothing. Because I think one of the biggest beliefs people have is that you have to start somewhere, or, that if you don't have anything, you're already on the back foot. And I don't believe that at all, because I believe your power to create actually comes from inside of you. And so if you are in this position where you feel like you have nothing, and I say that because you never actually have nothing, but if you feel like you have nothing and you don't have any money in the bank account to show for it, you can still create abundance, because abundance is a frequency and it's a mindset before it's anything else. And so in this free training, I'm going to teach you the exact ways that you can uncover your money blocks and really start getting into what are those core beliefs that are stopping you from receiving. And when you do clear that, I mean, I've worked with plenty of people over the last few years, and you will start to find that those frequencies start to shift, and then it's just a matter of time before you start to see the manifestation of that in 3D.
Well, when it is ready, which will be now since you are getting the show today, so I wouldn't have launched the show without it being ready, you can go to jjflizanes.com/abundance to get access to this training. This is valued at $497, the Abundance Kickstarter, but you can get it for free. jjflizanes.com/abundance, because I know a lot of you, while you might be doing better than you were doing a year ago or 6 months ago or 2 years ago, who couldn't use a new refreshed way to unblock themselves financially and get into the frequency of receiving a little bit easier. So please be sure to go to jjflizanes.com/abundance and get the Abundance Kickstarter, because I want to hear about all of the successes that you're all going to be having once you clear those blocks and get into that frequency of receiving. Because I agree 100%, Eesha, you are never with nothing. You have access to more than we could even facilitate in this lifetime. It's if we're in the right frequency to receive it. it, which again, my people know and understand that, but definitely getting there sometimes is where there's opportunity for growth. Let's say that. So I love that you're giving them a new tool. I can't wait to try it myself and see what happens. And besides the Abundance Kickstarter, you do have a podcast. Do you want to talk a little bit about the podcast?
Yeah, my podcast is called Success from the Soul. And that one, I interview highly successful seven-figure entrepreneurs who are really living their vision and their mission in a place of abundance. So we've got some really incredible speakers like Jeffrey Slater, Chris Duncan. We've had Emma Grayson on there, and there's a lot of wisdom to be had. So that one, most of the action actually happens over in the Facebook group. So you can definitely join me there to check that out.
And how do they find that Facebook group?
It's called Awakening and Ascension. If you just Google, if you Facebook my name, so Eesha, Eesha, Patel, Patel, you will find me on there. And if you just go facebook.com/group/Eesha Patel, that's the link to my page.
Excellent. Everyone, check that out. Check out the podcast, check out the Facebook page. And of course, go to jjflizanes.com/abundance to get the Abundance Kickstarter. Eesha, this has been amazing. I am so happy to know you and to know that you're doing this work in the world. It brings me a sense of calm and peace to know that you're traveling around the world and helping to elevate these grid lines on the earth to help the ascension that I'm so ready for, because I think I've heard that there's about 3% of the population that's actually awake, and which on one hand could sound kind of depressing and sad, but it's actually quite hopeful, because I can't wait to see what happens when more and more people move into that consciousness space of understanding and connecting a lot deeper, and being in more of alignment with source and recognizing their own source energy, and being able to allow in the information and the images and the guidance and the trust and the freedom and the love that we're all searching for. So I appreciate you being on the show. Thank you so much. And everyone, make sure to check out Eesha's stuff.
Thank you.